You are listening to Be Amplified, the podcast with Brie and Thais, episode 41. Hey Amplifiers, welcome to Be Amplified, the podcast. My name is Thais.
And I'm Brie Seeley. We are the co-founders of the Amplify Collective,
a movement aimed at radically disrupting how purpose-driven women connect and operate in the world.
Because we believe it's not just what you do, but who you are that matters.
Each week, join us for messages and interviews that will leave you feeling amplified and ready to change the world.
Let's do this.
Hello,
Amplifiers.
Thais Sky.
Brie Seeley.
It's Monday.
And another episode of Be Amplified, the podcast.
So we're going to talk today with Luna Love. I keep wanting to say Luna Lovegood. Like, I really do. Like, every time I say her name, I want to say Luna Lovegood. She is not a character from Harry Potter. Luna Love is an amazing friend, woman, and she's going to be talking to us about some amazing, juicy stuff like intuition and all that stuff. So we thought we would intro her conversation by talking about the art of listening.
But before we get there, we want to invite you all. We have a great event coming up next week in Los Angeles, and we would love to see you. We are all about in-person events. We love to give hugs. We love to connect people, and we want you in the room with us.
Yes, this is our bi-monthly, every other month mixer. We have such a good time with these different stores around LA. Last one was at Sweaty Betty. That was really cool. This one is Industrious, which is in downtown LA. It's an amazing co-working space that they have around the country. But this particular space is really, really sweet. We're really excited for it. So if you are available, we would love to see you. You can go check out our website, theamplifycollective.com. Go to the events tab. All of our events are there, our monthly dinner parties. We do coterie events for our membership women all the time. We have so many events. So go learn more about us on the website.
Amen.
Okay.
So
let's talk about listening.
Let's.
So I figure we can break this conversation down into like external listening and then internal listening. So external listening is let's share some thoughts and tools on how we can become better listeners out into the world. And then we'll talk about how to become better listeners to ourselves.
Amazing. So one of the questions I think that really kind of hit me, and this was a few years ago, but it's still a question that's being asked very regularly, is when you are in conversation with another person, are you listening to what they have to say, or are you just waiting to respond?
Yeah.
And I thought that that's a really good way to kind of start this because, you know, the first key to listening is to really get present with what are your current patterns around listening. Do you actively listen to people? Like, I know I'm the worst. When someone tells me their name, I will hear it, but I'm not listening, and I never remember people's names.
So apparently a way to help you remember people's names is to repeat their name back to them. Like if they say, hi, I'm Bob. Hi, Bob. Like to say it back. And to remember a trait that they have that starts with the same letter of their first name. So if Bob has
blue eyes,
then you can say it in your mind, blue-eyed Bob, blue-eyed Bob.
I love that.
There's a Netflix show called Brain Games, and there's this guy who memorized like 200 people's names in a matter of minutes, and so he talks about how he does it, and that's how he does it. So,
and the first key to all of that is listening to the person's name in the beginning, in the first place.
Yes, it's very important to listen. I'm actually I'm terrible at listening outside of, when I have my coaching hat on and I'm in my coaching session, like I feel like I do a pretty good job of like listening and supporting because that's the role that I'm in that moment. But if I'm just having a conversation with somebody, I interrupt them. I'm so into like what I want to say. It's actually really, really bad. I really want to become a better listener. For shizzle, my nizzle.
And I feel like one of the things that really keeps us from listening as well is our technology.
Yeah.
Because I know there have been some times when I'm like trying to talk to Thais and, maybe she's on her computer and I'm equally as guilty of this. We get so wrapped up in all of our devices that we do stop paying attention to what's going on around us. And if
Yeah.
someone is trying to speak to us, it can be a huge barrier to being able to listen.
I mean, there's nothing worse than having a conversation with someone and then they pull out their phone and then you know that they just immediately had stopped listening to you. It may not even be like that obvious. Like you may be at the dinner table, their phone is on the table, and you're having a conversation, and then they look down on their phone just to see if there's anything there. I mean, come on, that's so fucking rude. But we do it unconsciously all the time. But it immediately tells the person that's talking, you're not important. I'm not really listening to you. I'm more interested to see what blingy blingy is going on my phone. Again, I think we're all guilty of this. Brie and I are certainly, like I just said, like we're not,
Yeah.
this is definitely something that we're working through as well. And I think that it's becoming a detriment where we're really losing the ability to connect with someone in an authentic way and really have conversations that matter.
I know one of my biggest things is I get distracted real easily, and I'm working on it, actively working on my focus. But if I'm in conversation with someone, especially in public, and something catches my eye, like away from me looking at them, I'm instantly gone
Yeah.
and just like not present in the conversation at all. And
Yeah.
so focus is really like, I've been playing with focus even just with myself, like when I'm at home. Can I be present with whatever I'm doing? Without having 50 million tabs open on my internet browser and my cell phone in my hand and, trying to give instructions over here or whatever. And so, I mean, you've said this before. I think that one of the keys to listening is really intimacy.
Yes, it is. We're a culture where we're not really nourishing ourselves. We're not really taking in. We're not receiving. We're not bringing in depth that is that is possible at every single moment because we're so bent on shallow living. We're so bent on just going from one shallow thing to another shallow thing. And then no wonder we're not feeling heard and seen. No wonder depression is on the rise. No wonder, we're just
We don't
so
have-
unhappy.
Well, and we don't have close friendships or
Yeah, and we
anything
don't have
like
close
that.
friendships. So
Also, I think you should trademark that shallow living thing. I like
yeah,
that.
you like that?
That's good.
I feel like it's so true, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. And I can see how it really, really can affect relationships. Like with my boyfriend, he'll be saying something to me. If I'm on the computer, I'm not gonna listen to him, and I immediately rob him of the opportunity to connect with me, my opportunity to connect with him. He's not gonna likely to like be waiting around until I'm ready for him to talk to me. And what's on my computer that's so freaking important on Facebook, right? That I can't take a moment to look up and make that connection, look at him in the eyes and really listen to what he has to say.
Well, and I think one good practice here that, actually I think would be really good for you and I to implement as well is we always just assume everyone's like there. Like my former publicist used to text message me, and if I didn't respond to her within a minute, she would text message me again. And if I didn't respond within a minute, she'd email me and call me,
Yeah.
and just needed me to be there and on. And so I feel like a good exercise might be like, asking someone, hey, are you in a place where we can have a conversation right now?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good
that's
kind of habit to get into.
That's also a matter of consent, especially if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody and you're ready, right? You've prepped all day to have this conversation, and then you go up to that person and we naturally just assume that person is ready to be in that mindset to have a difficult conversation with us, and we really have to be cognizant of that and really ask, like, are you in a place right now for us to have a conversation about this relationship or about whatever? And let them say no. Let them have their experience of actually right now I'm really caught up in something. Can we do it in an hour or whatever that looks like? So yeah, I love that. And I think for when it comes to listening to others, it's really being cognizant of the impulse and the desires that we have to want to shift our attention away from what we're doing or away from who we're listening to and really notice it. Really be in that space of so deeply present that you notice the propensity, you notice the natural desire you have to check your phone and see if you can just sit with that urge, sit with that uncomfortable desire of wanting to shift your attention and not do it and see what happens.
I've been going through this just with myself. I happen to spend a lot of time alone just because that's my lifestyle right now. But I was laying in bed last night and like watching one of my trashy NBC shows that I watch. And I've started removing my phone from my bedroom at night. And I'm sitting there watching this show, and I couldn't just be present with watching the show. It was like I felt like a junkie. I was like, "Where's my phone? I need to open my apps. How many likes on Instagram did I get? How
Yeah.
many? Who's on Facebook right now? Did it like all the things?"
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, we're so accustomed to having information come at us at such fast speeds. I mean, I can't just watch a show. I have to watch my show and be on my phone. I mean, I just don't have the show. Most shows that I watch don't grab me enough where I can really just sit there and watch it, and I need something else to kind of ease my time. And it's so funny, which is one of the reasons why I don't like watching shows with Mark, is because when I'm watching TV with him and I get on my phone, he goes, "Thais, are you watching the show or are you being on your phone?"
Wait, pause. Let's have this discussion, because when Thais and I watch shows together, she gets really angry at me because I fall asleep.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different. There's nothing, it's so not fun to be watching something and then have the other person fall asleep. Like, it's so not fun.
Well, maybe you can start empathizing with Mark.
No,
That it's
I
not
can't.
fun to watch a show with someone who's not watching the show.
So he'd be like, "Babe, are you watching or are you on your phone?" I'm like, no, I'm watching. And then I have to put the phone away and I have to sit there and actually watch the shit. So I found myself avoiding watching TV with him.
This
so
is
that
hilarious.
I can
I
watch
hope he's
TV by
listening.
myself.
I hope he's listening.
He knows my
Um,
crazy ways.
So we might seem like we've gotten off subject of listening, but this stuff is all the same. Like, if we're unable to take in, watching a Netflix show for 20 minutes, how do you think we're going to be able to show up and take in a conversation with a genuine human that's standing in front of us?
And since Brie and I are and Amplify, we're all about genuine connections and authentic community and relationships. This is a really critical way that we devoid ourselves of having intimate experiences.
Mhm.
And again, it's that shallow living. It's like we refuse to really connect with people because it's an intimacy issue. It's very hard for us to be intimate with ourselves. It's very hard for us to be intimate with the people around us. And then we end up feeling alone. We end up feeling so alone.
Which then perpetuates the increased cell phone usage and all of the things we've talked about, because then we're craving that intimacy, but we're unable to have it in a real sense. So then we just rely on Facebook and Instagram and all the things.
Well, it's so funny. Mark would be like, "Thais, the amount of time that you spend on social media isn't normal." And it's healthy for me to recognize that, part of my need to be on social media has to do with my business. And so there is that. But it's just so fascinating how, I don't know if you know this, Brie, but the majority of the world isn't on social media the way entrepreneurs are on social media. And so I've had to really take a moment and be like, okay, you're right. And what do I need to do to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so that I'm not always on social media, because that's not really being in a place of listening to yourself or to others if you're on social media.
I've been trying to implement, like I said, so my phone is no longer in my bedroom, which is really great. I don't get up in the mornings. I don't even allow myself to touch my phone until after 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And even then, so I'm trying to check my email first thing in the morning, email and socials in the middle of the day, and in the evening before I, shut off, whatever time that looks like.
Yeah.
And I'm trying so hard to implement this new schedule, because
I've tried it. It's so hard.
I get into reactive mode then, because then if I get an email, then I react to it, versus having purposeful, committed time to do certain things,
Yeah.
And then I just spend my whole day reacting to all of these external stimuli versus being the one in power to control the actions that I'm taking throughout the day.
It's so hard. I mean, I did the whole cell phone not in the bedroom for a month, and it was amazing and beautiful, and then it slowly crept in, and now I'm back to normal. And, Mike and I have a couple guidelines that we use for bedtime experience. And one of those is to not be on social media at night. The thing is, sometimes I have a hard time falling asleep, and he passes out 10 o'clock easy because he has to get up early for work. And sometimes I can't fall asleep. So I like to listen to podcasts and guided meditations, and that requires my phone.
I said this too. So this was at our dinner party. This is what we talked about
Oh yeah.
this last week. And one of the girls was like, get an iPod. Put them on the iPod.
But it's podcasts.
That
Like,
is true. I know.
can't
That's
do
what,
that. So it's
'cause
like
mine is my visualization, because I record my visualization of my desired life and
Yeah.
put it on my phone and listen to it. And I have to say, in the last few days, I haven't listened to it as much because it's not right there.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I have to learn how to
It's a
cultivate
catch-22.
self-will, like willpower to
Airplane
have
mode.
my cell phone. Again, podcast, Brie, podcasts.
Oh, I guess.
So
You
like
need data.
I have to cultivate willpower to have my phone next to me and not feel the need to check it. So it's really good for me to build that muscle. And we'll see how it goes. But there is one thing that I want to make sure that we address in terms of external listening. And it's this book that Brie gave me.
Oh, really?
About keys and kingdoms and
Oh, yeah.
queens and kings.
Okay, so this book is pretty good. It is called The Keys to the Kingdom, and it is by Alison Armstrong. And it goes through kind of understanding men and the different stages that men go through in life.
And it's great
pretty
for
fascinating.
It's great for women to learn how men operate, because if we can understand, men's psychology, then we can support them and be better partners and be better caregivers or
and
whatever.
She also has a book understanding the women's side of things too. So this is just happens to be the one that Thais and I have both read. But
So she talks about the keys to the kingdom, and there are different, kind of tools and things to support you in cultivating a deeper relationship with your partner. But again, it's not just your partner, it's any men in your life. So men tend to be single focused, which means they focus on one thing at a time. They do that thing and then they move on to the next thing. And I've seen this in my partnership with Mark. He's very good at fully focusing on one thing and then moving on to the next thing, whereas I'm doing like 30 million things at once. And I can hold multiple thoughts and multiple ideas and multiple things in my head, whereas, men tend to, now this is not, of course, all men, but just in general, focus and have one thought at a time, like one focused thought at a time. And so when we as women talk to each other, we interrupt each other, we're chatty, we're like quick, we like change subjects very quickly, and it's the way we operate. But men don't operate that way. And so when we try to have a conversation with men the same way that we have conversations with women, it ends up not working out because men feel like train wrecked. Their one focused thought is now off the rails, and then they have to take a moment and they have to recalibrate and figure out what you're talking about now. And it's just this whole confusing thing. So the book recommends that you use this key to the kingdom. It's called listening. And if you listen to your partner talk and then give them like an additional 15 seconds after they finish talking to collect their thoughts and say more things, then they'll actually talk in the relationship. Like this idea that men don't talk, it's not that they don't talk, it's that we never give them space to talk and to collect their thoughts and to share. And, it's been working.
I want to hear about that in a second, but that really reminds me, because I have a really hard time with silence. And so, like, I'm the kind to, like, if there's silence, I jump in immediately. And that's a good practice, a good reminder for me is to kind of allow space in conversations. Like, it's okay to have space in conversations.
Maybe we should just have a silent moment right now.
Is it going to be awkward?
You can tell Bree's like getting like anxious.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say something. Okay, what were you just saying about it's working with Mark?
It is. It's working. Like he's like, wow, whatever book you're reading, it's just so good.
Hashtag you're welcome, Mark. You owe me a lot of things lately, by the way. Let's just say this. Did you tell him yesterday?
No, I didn't. So, listening to him has helped him feel seen and heard. And isn't that what we all genuinely want? I was texting my dear friend Rachel last night, and we were talking about how we're addicted to likes. Not we, Rachel and me, but we as in the society are addicted to likes on social media. And she's like, it's because we all want to feel special. And it's like, of course we do. We want to feel special. We want to feel safe. We want to feel loved. We want to feel seen and heard. We all have that deep innate desire to be understood in the world, and listening is one of the best characteristics that if you can develop will make other people feel so seen, understood, heard, loved, safe. And you can imagine that the people who truly master the art of listening what type of perks and things that they will get. Because when someone feels listened to, they're much more likely to give. They're much more likely to be generous because
Mhm.
they feel like you get them. And so yeah, so I have seen it being working in my relationship, not that we had problems with communication in the past, but I just never realized that this is how men's brains operate. And now that I know this, it's been really cool to see that, he has a lot to say and he has a lot to share. And if I just let him go without having that quick dialogue, we can actually have a much more nourishing conversation. So, tip numero uno:
Beautiful.
listen and notice if it's uncomfortable and you want to, go to your device and
Mhm.
see if you
Check
can
out.
really sit with that uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
It's the only way we're going to break the pattern.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the internal listening and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I hear so many people so often be like, "Well, I can't meditate," or "I don't get messages," or "I ask and the universe doesn't answer me," or, all these things. And I feel like it's a very similar process because we ask and then we're like immediately, "Okay, what's the answer?" And then if it doesn't come, then we start chitter-chattering in our heads and we remove that space that we're trying to create. And of course the universe doesn't answer, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, so, Brie and I host a monthly dinner party here in Los Angeles, and we love it so much. It's how Amplify got started. We love our dinner parties, but the past 5 months, we've been feeling a little frustrated with doing dinner parties in restaurants because we want to have a little bit more control over the atmosphere. And that's really important to us. We want to have it. What am I trying to say? We want to know what we're getting ourselves into. And then sometimes in restaurants, you don't know where you're going to be. You don't know what's going to be around you.
Like in March when we got put next to this huge networking event.
Yeah,
Huge.
right
And
next
like,
to us. And
oh
so
my God.
we couldn't hear at all. And it kind of defeats the purpose of having a dinner party if you can't hear the person on the other side of the table. So, and we had no way of predicting that was going to happen. So we've been talking and brainstorming what to do next for our dinner party. And so far, an answer hasn't come. And just yesterday, Brie was like, I feel like we've been saying that we're going to come up with a decision, that something's going to have to happen for months now. And I reminded her, like, we haven't gotten the download yet. We haven't heard anything back yet. We don't have an idea of what to do moving forward. So when we try to force it, when we try to just make it happen without the listening, without, holding space for the what if and giving, silence and just letting that creativity kind of stew. If you don't let that happen, then ultimately you're going to create something that you're not going to like again. And so we've been really playing with this idea of not knowing what's going to happen next and sitting with that frustration, sitting with the annoyance of not knowing, but not being willing to just make another plan just to make another plan.
Yeah.
I mean, the desire has come up. The desire has been there. But we've really, really stepped back again and again and be like, no, I'm not going to make a decision unless it feels really good. So far, none of the options that are offered to us feel really good. So we're going to keep being in that place of trusting and asking and being open and making connections and seeing what happens.
And for me, like what's really important is, I've been learning about like psychology and stuff, and one of the main things in my life is that I really like certainty. It's just one of my
Well,
things.
it's not just your thing, Brie, my love.
Well, I know
it's
it's
all of our things.
it is all of our
especially people
things.
who have experienced trauma in their past.
Yeah, and I think that that's where mine stems from. But because I like certainty, it's important for me to schedule this stuff into my calendar. So it's important for me, and I know this might seem counterintuitive, but it's important for me to schedule space, like literally putting on my calendar space to just be, to be with the universe, to be with myself, to take a walk, whatever that looks like. And so I've been meditating more lately than I usually do because it's been really important. I haven't been getting any answers this year. We're like almost through quarter 1 and I'm just not getting any answers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and one of the things that I've noticed is that, just as we have an intimacy issue with other people, we have an intimacy issue with ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, standing in line at the grocery store, we're on our phone. You
Mm.
know, walking from one building to another, we have our headbuds in and we're listening to music. You know, we're going from one task to the other and we have to distract ourselves the entire time. So we're never really in a space of, you know, I know people who have TVs. Like, I actually don't have a physical TV. Anything
Oh.
that I watch is on my computer, but they'll come home, they turn on the news or they turn on something, and then they just have that TV on the background. And I know that part of that is because it's how they grew up in childhood and it feels comforting. But just notice how often you don't really allow any silence to come in. Because if you don't have silence, if you're always filling your life with noise, if you walk into your car and you turn on the radio, you get home, you listen, you know, you put on the TV, you get to work and you put the radio on your desk. I mean, you know, you never have an opportunity to be in that silence. And that silence of not doing anything is the clearing that's necessary for something new to come in.
Yeah, to be able to listen.
Yeah.
I dated a guy once who lived alone. He owned 6 televisions.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I was like, what
That's
do you
impressive.
do? Turn them all on and then run between all of your rooms and just like experience them all like a little rat running through your house? Like, what? I'm like, how do you need 6 televisions?
Yeah.
But that again, intimacy issue. If you cannot walk, you know, from your living room into your bedroom and not have a television on, there's a deeper issue there.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I've been doing is whenever I take Chewy on a walk, I don't bring my cell phone.
No wonder you haven't been responding to me late. No, I'm just kidding.
And
I'm totally kidding.
It feels really good because there's nothing to distract me. The minute I bring my cell phone, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm texting, I'm on social media. I'm not even really paying attention to the walk. And when I leave my cell phone at home and I can just be with Chewy and the birds and the breeze, it feels so good. It's like I'm giving myself space to just breathe and just to be. And can I infuse more of that into my life? And it feels really good to just create a space for the listening. And Luna's going to talk a lot more about the art of listening to self. But we just want to make sure that you guys understand that in order for you to listen to yourself, you have to create that space for it. And being busy and filling your time and not having a single moment to breathe can be a real detriment. And again, it's not saying that you have to spend 10 hours meditating. That's not feasible for any of us. But it's like when you're showering, are you like, can you be more mindful in the shower, brushing your teeth, doing dishes? Can you use that space and that time to be in reverence to yourself, to be praying, to be open to the answers?
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, before we bring Luna on, one last little reminder is to join us on our Facebook group in our little online community. We have more discussions like this, and there will be an extended cut of Luna's interview there as well. So you can join us there at www.beamplified.community. We love our group there, and it's growing.
Yes. Yay.
So.
All right. So let's bring Luna on. We're here live. No, we're not live. This
Not
was
at all.
recorded years and years ago. We're here with Luna Love. And it's so funny because I always say to people, like, Brie, my love, you know, hi, my love. And so with Luna, it's just, it's already there. It's already in her name. We are so excited to be interviewing Luna. How are you doing, my love? See what I'm saying? See?
Doing well. Doing a good morning. Having a good morning.
Oh,
Awesome.
good.
So let me tell our audience a little bit about you. Luna Love is a women's leadership mentor assisting those called to be change makers in the world in achieving clear vision for their lives by providing supportive, life-promoting experiences, practical tools, and spiritual wisdom to align one's divine essence, authentic expression, and life purpose. She creates transformative experiences for her clients through the power of self-awareness and self-love. Luna facilitates online courses, group coaching, workshops, immersion programs, and retreats to support her clients in devoting themselves to themselves and serving the world from that place. Additionally, she works as a counselor at a leading holistic drug and alcohol rehabilitation center, writes for numerous online publications. Most of all, Luna is devoted to walking her path in the beauty way.
I love it, Luna. So we like to start all of our conversations off with, what does it look like for you to live an amplified life?
For me to live an amplified life, it's really about listening. I feel like my actions are the amplification of my listening. And so the practice of going back and really asking and listening to where I'm guided and how I'm guided to show up is the first part. And then actually showing up is how I amplify that answer and share it outwardly and express I want how I show up in the world to be an expression of gratitude, an amplified expression of gratitude for the communication and the guidance and the messages that I'm receiving that are allowing me to show up and be of service and share my gifts.
That's great. I love that. Your first word, I was like, yes, this interview is going to be amazing.
Also, you can use the word amplify in every other word for the rest of the interview. We give you total permission to do that.
So this idea of listening, I think, is fascinating because so often, like, in so many different areas, we are conditioned to not listen. We are conditioned to not listen to ourselves. We are conditioned when we're in conversation to not listen to the other person, but instead, wait for that break so we can respond. And so I love this. So, you're obviously talking about listening to self, and what so many of us run around with these busy lives and busy heads and busy things and just all over the place. So I would love for you to talk more about your process of listening and how you've kind of mastered that in your life.
Yeah, it's listening to myself, but it's also listening to others and to the collective and to what people need, and not from me, but what are the ways in which I can show up. It's about listening to my communities and also what some might call God, is like listening to that guidance. And it's all the same thing, but for me it's a practice of quieting my mind, which for me is constantly a challenge. And
for all of us,
yeah, and really humbling myself and getting out of the way of I know. That's one of my things as a kid, was needing to appear smart. And so I lied about things that I knew and pretended just to appear a certain way. And that's been a process of this really old ingrained pattern of not wanting to seem like I don't know or I'm uneducated or ignorant about an issue. And it takes, for me right now, it's taking really being okay with being called out on that to be able to hear what the needs of other people are, rather than assuming that I have the answers or that I have something that might help them, because I don't know that until I really hear them. And that goes for myself too. It's I think so often in the work that I do with my clients, there's this self-awareness can almost be a detriment sometimes, because it's we know, we're so aware of our patterns and the things that we do that don't serve us or work for us, and yet that awareness can almost keep us trapped in them, because we're just stuck in the awareness rather than really humbling ourselves to ask for to really deeply ask for how do I shift this, and coming to a place where it's not that I know. So many times when I work with a client, I'll invite a perspective forward, and they'll be like, oh, I know that's such an issue. It's that I knowness, that righteousness really prevents us from hearing on a deeper level and from really listening and really allowing the words or the message or the sentiment to really touch us in the places that need it, that I know kind of keeps it at a distance. And so I'm aware of that within myself, and I'm aware of how that affects others. And my practice right now is really in the humbling of myself to remove that sense of righteousness.
I love that you're talking about this, and I've written about this before. This touches very dear to my heart, which is that I know barrier. And when we say I know, when we identify something as I know that that's sadness, or I know that that's a pattern I've been playing out, I know that this is my propensity to do this thing, we stop getting curious. We stop investigating. And like you said, Luna, we stop listening. We stop getting to the, okay, we know this, but can we hold a space for why it's here, what is trying to tell us, what the deeper layer is. And oftentimes when you say that I know, it's actually coming out of a place of fear, because by saying I know, we now don't have to investigate. We now can just put that as a categorization of an understanding and just put it on a shelf along with everything else. And so I love that you're talking about that in self-awareness, because I have seen that to be so true and detrimental to our path and to our listening.
Absolutely.
I didn't have a question to follow up with that. I'm just so caught up in the listening.
Right.
So what does listening to other people look like? Like, why, in your opinion, are we so obsessed with having to have the right response instead of actually listening to what people are saying?
Yeah, one of the things that I feel like humanity's pandemic is the lack of empathy. And when we talk about like cross-cultural listening or whatever these barriers, or ages, sex, religion, these barriers that prevent us from really connecting with one another, there's this lack of empathy, and we have it with ourselves, and it's the pandemic of humanity right now. It's just, we often like just refuse to see ourselves and one another in our human experience and let it be okay, and really connect with the part of us that's like, oh, like I feel that, like I've been there. It's not my story. The context is different, but I can really, really empathize with you. And so when I was in my master's program, one of the things that they I can't remember what they call them, soul-centered skills, spiritual psychology skills, was the second one, was like listening. And we talked about all these different ways in which we listen. It was very scientific and it made a lot of sense. But the thing that stuck out to me on that paper with that skill was this simple sentence that I'll never forget, and I use often, which is listen with the ears of your heart. And that's always like my compass to going back, like, am I really listening from the place of allowing my heart to receive not just the words, but the content and the underlying and the energy in what's being spoken or shared. And so that kind of deepening myself to be able to listen and hear what the human emotion is, even outside of the words that they're saying. Because someone might be like, I'm not angry. And they're like very obviously angry. So like the words don't actually tell as much, but just connecting and like, oh, that person is like not ready to admit that they're angry. Like just having empathy for that. So for me, listening is like listening with my whole being, not just my ears and not just my heart, like my body, the sensations, it's like being aware and present to all of those things that really help guide me. So like, I know I can feel in my cells and my bones and my body. And like, I get truth bumps when something really resonates.
Wait. I love that.
She just said truth bumps instead of goosebumps.
Yeah. Because that's what they are. Like, it's so apparent for me that that's what they are. And it happens so often. And I've stopped realizing that like, oh, I'm not actually cold. I'm actually like experiencing something in a sensory way that's affirming what's true for me. And when I can like listen to those messages in my body and in other people's bodies and hearts and minds and words, it's a deeper listening. And I think that that's so important, including when I'm listening to myself.
I love that you're talking about this. You know that we've been talking a lot, Luna, you and me, about intersectional feminism and what our role is as white women in the conversation. And one of the things that I keep coming up in my research is that as in any level of you having privilege, wherever that level looks like for you listening, you may not be white, but you may make a lot of money. That means you have more privilege than people who don't have money, right? Privilege is a spectrum, but what I'm finding again and again is the person that has the privilege, it's their responsibility, which is their ability to respond, their capacity in that moment should be and needs to be to enter the space of listening, to listen to the voices of those who have less privilege, to listen and get curious and understand their point of view. And this is so beautiful that you're speaking about this, because I can feel how applicable this can be in the political conversation. We may have someone who voted for someone that you don't agree with, and it's very easy to then want to, make them hear you, like share your opinions and make them hear your opinions, versus entering the space of listening. And are you listening from the heart, which is, are you really open to the possibility that this individual has similar needs to your own? And he may have a different perspective, and he or she, whatever, they may have a different perspective on things and voted in a different alignment than yours. But what if at the end of the day, if you can step into a form of empathy, you'll see that you're really the same, that your needs, your biological needs, your desires for this life are virtually the same.
Yeah. And for me personally, it's there's a fear of like being called out around being ignorant on a topic that like that allows me to avoid the topic from that fear. And like, it's just like easier to play small and like not use my privilege to not be called out in a way that might be uncomfortable or shine me in a certain light or like those things. And that's really what I've been surrendering is like, it's more like that. What I look like is so much less important than these issues. And getting out of my way. And like at this point in my life, I don't necessarily have a position. There are times when like positionality is such like the word righteousness can be used in both a positive and negative. And I think to have a sense of self and a sense of where you lie on a map is great to be able to engage, but then to also be flexible in that and be able to move and to hear and to listen and to adapt once more information and more felt empathetic information comes into our sphere around that topic, is being able to move that position. And so I don't feel like I have a sense of positionality in any topic right now, as much as just, which is like the preliminary step, is really being aware of where we are holding too tightly, because it's a sense of judgment and right and wrong that's going to keep us limited from growing. Totally. And whether it's like learning more about a topic or not, it's just like growing as a person means surrendering our positionality.
Yeah, I love that. Tice and I have been recording a lot of more controversial, I don't know if they're controversial, but they're just like a little bit different topics than we usually talk about. And we had a moment last week when we were recording that we kind of looked at each other and we're like, I feel like an idiot. Like we're talking about things that like we're not experts in, and like we don't have the answers, and like we don't know anything, and we're both having to go through that act of surrendering now and being really vulnerable about the fact that we are in this great state of listening and this great state of learning, that we don't have all the answers, and that's why we're bringing brilliant guests on to help educate not only our listeners but also ourselves. And it's kind of a cool place to be in, is just that inquisitive questioning, that like, teach me more, what can I learn about the other humans on this planet? So thank you for bringing all of this up.
Well, and then I'm curious, like, okay, like, taking it to the next level, it's like, so when does listening kind of, from this perspective of taking in information and disseminating and understanding, at what point does that become too passive? And when is it appropriate to start speaking up and start being a little bit confrontational to other people from the space of not necessarily quote unquote conflict, war, but really from the space of a deep thrusting love for the unveiling that you are understanding, and that love energy, that force energy that allows a mother to pick up a car if her baby's in danger, right? That type of energy and speaking up. Like, when does that come into play?
Yeah, I'm still in the listening, and my prayer in the listening, even in the conversations, is like, how may I serve? That's always my prayer. That's always my question, is like, how can I serve? How can I serve a greater good? And listening to communities and immersing myself in the listening is the process right now. And like, I just trust that guidance, and like, I mean, just even us having this conversation is an action. It's not so much in the listening anymore, and to like change the conversation. And so I've been having Facebook posts and conversations with people that are not the norm as much as what I would normally be talking about. And like, my podcast is in a similar shift and like pause area as well, or not as well. I don't know what yours is, but like just shifting the conversation, you know, and there's actions coming forward there. And I've been finding that like, so I kind of, somebody that I had worked with for a long time, I recently was like, you know, I just don't feel like it's an alignment for us to work together. I'm not seeing these aspects of you and what you're upholding in your life that are really valuable and important to me. And I got back this like, not defensive, but just clarifying note of like, I'm actually doing all of this stuff. And I was like, I've literally been friends with you for like 3 years and had no idea that this was a part of your sphere whatsoever. So there's like a humility in which like, we don't talk about like, oh, I just donated like $5,000 to this nonprofit. There's like a humility in not needing to talk about that. And then there's actually talking about it from the place of inviting others to like evoke their passion for what they're passionate about. And like, whatever calls and pulls on their heartstrings. So it might not be the same topics. Like, you and I are in conversation because there's a similar interest there. And like, you and I are in conversation outside of this conversation because there's a similar interest in how we can serve in these other ways. And like, somebody else that might not be their arena, and they are serving in other ways. And just because they're not involved or interested in the same topics, it's like, I can't have my foot in every door. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not my responsibility, nor is it my capacity to like save the dolphins, save the oceans, you know, like all lives matter, like every issue. There's just a million issues. And there are people who are moved to serve in different areas. And like, my focus is on women's empowerment and healing the lines that divide and separate us, not just with women, but in gender. And that's like a big focus for me. And I don't necessarily need to have my foot in the action world in all of the arenas in which I can serve. But if I'm passionate about my cause and I share it, not as a way to get people investing their time and energy into the same cause, but as an inspiration to invite them to step up into taking action in the causes that are important to them, I think that's the key, is also just like not holding people to needing to be in the same conversation.
It's really funny that you say this, Luna, because there is that process when you learn something new where it's a normal part of the learning curve, where once you start learning something new, you immediately judge people who aren't there. Or, for example, when I first did yoga teacher training, you know, when you're a student, you can surrender to the teacher, you trust the teacher fully. Once you become a teacher, you start going to these yoga classes and you judge the crap out of every teacher because you're in this learning. And it's not that we're doing it out of a malicious intent. It's that as we're learning and as we're trying to figure out the new space that we can take up, we look to other people to see if that's what we want or if that's not what we want, right? We use external measures to determine our internal landscape. And so it's so good that you're bringing this up, because as Brie and I are kind of spending more time in this learning capacity and this understanding of these issues, I've found myself being very judgy of other people for not getting it, even though I hadn't gotten it for a very long time. And so, there's definitely something to be said about knowing when that judgment is arising and really taking it and understanding that that's actually a judgment of self, right? That's a judgment of our ignorance. That's a judgment of our, of maybe the slow growth that we have an expectation that we grow faster than we may necessarily be growing.
Yeah, if you look at a timeline, it's like that judgment is whatever the judgment is right now could be applicable to you 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Or, whatever the timeline is. It's like I believe in like resonance versus judgment has like so supported me in my life. Like, oh, that just doesn't resonate with me, rather than like it's right, it's wrong, it's good, it's bad, they don't know, like whatever it is. It's just like, oh, like that perspective doesn't resonate with me anymore.
Yeah, I think that's great, because like you said, there are so many issues out there, and especially looking at our political landscape right now, there's something new that pops up literally every day. Mm-hmm. Like every single day we're supposed to be calling all of our senators about like a bajillion different issues and all these things, and really finding what resonates with each of our listeners is so important. You don't have to be passionate about every issue, and that's okay. So many of us, I feel like the people that do get judgy about like, well, you're not passionate about my issue, are really looking at it from their perspective, like their singular individual perspective, versus looking at all of the issues from a universal perspective. And, honestly, I've read a bunch of articles that's kind of what's gotten us into the mess that we're in. Like everyone's only looking at, the political landscape from their point of view. From their singular point of view, what's going to be best for them versus what's going to be best for the collective.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that has gotten me in quite a lot of bit of trouble. Not having a position, but seeing the greater good before maybe other people might be able to see it.
Yeah.
And that's come across as like the lack of empathy for those who are existing in a state of like fear and upset. And I've had to like, okay, well, I can see the future of this being for the greater good. Mm-hmm. And I understand like not everyone has that perspective nor wants to hear that perspective.
Yeah.
And like, I don't necessarily think that I was imposing it as much as just sharing it from my, like, this is my truth and this is what I see. And it had like brought value to a lot of people, and also like upset to a lot of people.
It's interesting because it's almost like a timing, right? Like if someone that parent passed away, very recently, and he's in a state of grief, like we can tell this person that, everything's going to be okay. Eventually you'll move on from this. Eventually this will just be a blip in your past. Like life will go on. Like you're going to go off to have a great life. And those things could all be true. But when we say it in that moment of his grief, we kind of interrupt his capacity to be in that experience. But that's at an individual level. It's much harder when we're speaking of it from a collective level where everyone is in a different stage. How do you, be in your truth and share that without robbing people of their experience of their grieving of the presidency or whatever else, is coming up for them.
Yeah, I read an article recently, and I think for me, what's coming up in response to that share is like, there's a difference in saying something to someone and like telling somebody, like when somebody's parent dies, there's like zero things that are going to be said that are going to like help that person. They've got to go through their process. There might be like the perfect thing and somebody else has been there, and it doesn't land because we're in our own experience that's ours. Even though other people have experienced grief in their own way, there's something so personal and like in the realm of ownership around that. And so I find that there's a difference in like holding a truth within your being and speaking something directly to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like letting that person know like everything's going to be okay is different than like embodying trust and letting that trust be the communication of that, rather than like telling them and trying to make them believe something that we believe is true.
Mm-hmm.
And I read an article recently by Virginia Rosenberg. I can't remember the name of the article, but it was like spiritual, like basically in a nutshell, like ways that people who have spiritual jargon are actually being violent. And
oh my gosh, Luna, you need to send us that article.
It's
Mm-hmm.
it's
that
amazing.
sounds right up our alley.
It's amazing. Oh my God. I will send it to you and put it in the show notes, because it's just like
Yes.
everyone should read it. But she just spoke so clearly around, she wasn't calling anyone out as much as looking at the actions which she's seeing. And it was the way in which it was written was totally calling people out, but in a way that didn't create objection or defensiveness.
So calling
It
people
was
in.
just
Yeah.
exactly. And it was that. And I've read other things that speak differently, and just like conversations that I've had that I've repelled people and people have repelled me by that sense of like right, wrong, like see this, you need to see this kind of thing. And it was just written so eloquently that it was calling people in. It was this heartfelt, passionate, moving, you couldn't help but listen with the ears of your heart, because she was speaking from that place. So to go back and answer that other question of like, when do we take action and how? I think it's important to uphold that piece as a core value of like speaking from the heart, not in the way of like, I'm so hyped up on this issue that I'm just going to like blurt anything out, but really having a sense of like, if you want people to hear you, the sense of like inclusivity and actually speaking from the heart, not like impassioned, but heartfelt, like wholehearted, which means that we're, connecting to the hearts of all.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. So often too, like, especially of course in the political landscape, as we're talking about, like we get into that impassioned state and then we start pointing fingers too, which is also like never a really helpful thing. Like no one likes to be accused or judged or deemed wrong or any of those things. And so just like Luna said, really stepping into a heart space and speaking your truth from there. And if someone doesn't agree with you, it's okay. Like, if we all agreed with each other, if we all had the same beliefs, life would be a pretty boring place to be.
But there is a difference, right? Like, what is, or is there a difference between pointing fingers and acknowledging the broken system, right? If you say, well, this is this because of the patriarchy, for example, is that pointing a finger, or is that naming a systemic issue, or are those the same things, or are those different things?
So for me, there's a sense, like I was speaking to, of like non-resonance, and Brene Brown communicates this so beautifully. She says that boundaries are so important, and boundaries are simply, in her definition, what is okay and what is not okay. And it's not coming from a place of judgment. It's not saying you're wrong, you're a bad person because you do this. It's saying this behavior is not okay. In my field, I'm not participating in this, like, end of story.
Mm-hmm.
And that, her implementing boundaries has made her so much more compassionate than she ever was.
Mm-hmm.
It's having those boundaries that have allowed her to really like see those pains in other people, and also just be like, and that's not okay for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I think if we all had a greater sense of like what's okay and not okay, but remove the judgment aspect from it, it would be so much easier for us to learn from one another, because as soon as that judgment is there, we don't feel safe to hear the other person. And our defenses are up, and like their wound has triggered our wound. But if there's no judgment there, and it's simply just like, this behavior is not okay for me. It's not that you're a bad person or a wrong person or anything about you. It's just like, this is not okay. I'm not personally picked on, or like whoever I'm speaking to, I'm not personally picking on them. And so they feel safe. It's like, I love you. I want to be in relationship with you. I want to connect with you. I want to hear what you have to say. And this way of speaking to me is not okay. And I'm not going to allow it into my life or this relationship. And so if you want to connect, we have to learn how to do this a different way. I didn't say anything about that person. I've done a lot of couples counseling, and this is the thing. It's like saying something when there's a judgment or a blame. We can't hear the other person because we just got hurt and we don't feel safe and our defenses are up. And then it goes back and forth and back and forth. But if there's just simply like, this is not okay for me, all of a sudden we can hear one another.
Oh, so good. So good. And for those of you listening, we're going to continue this conversation and talk about safety and talk about blame. There's just so much good stuff here to unpack with Luna. So if you want to catch the rest of our interview, please go to http:// whatever that situation looks like, www, I don't know why I even started with http, www.beamplified.community. Join our Facebook group and you will catch even more of Luna. But for those of you who want to learn more about Luna and find her on the interwebs, Luna, how can people get a hold of you?
You can go to lunaloveleadership.com, and I'm there. You can find me on Facebook on Instagram and Facebook under the same name, Luna Love Leadership. And yeah, I'd love to connect. I've got lots of free goodies on my site, and would love to just hear from you. And I'm really talking about this conversation a lot in my newsletter and having dialogue with the community there. So feel free to sign up and continue.
I love it.
Perfect. Thank you, Miss Luna. We adore you. And this conversation was great. Again, if you guys want more, we're going to be asking Luna all sorts of juicy questions over in our Facebook community. So hop on over there, come join us, and you can hear all the digs.
And then, you can find out more about us at our website, theamplifiedcollective.com. We're on all the socials at The Amplified Co. We love you. Go on. Go lead an amplified life. For the love of God, we need you to go live an amplified life. Peace.